This webinar is brought to you by Center for Nonprofit Leadership and Leadership Alumni Leaders Network, supported by the Top Board. I'm Stacey Low from CNPL, a part of the National Volunteer and Philanthropy Center. This conversation is intended for exchanges of insights, learnings, and understanding on how Gen X and Y leaders in the nonprofit arena contribute and achieve their involvement in various leadership roles, how they navigate the challenges they face and what guided them, and how Gen X and Y can further contribute and succeed in the nonprofit scene, and how two generations of leaders in the same sector learn from one another and collaborate in the new normal. Before we continue further, I'd like to request your attention for some administrative matters. There will be a video and audio recording for this session. All attendees' cameras will be switched on during the webinar. To make this an interactive session, it would be nice for us to see everybody. Do turn on your video. If you have questions or comments, please hold them for now. We would love to hear them during the panel discussion. All attendees to remain muted until you have questions or your comments during the panel discussion. If you would like to ask a question or comment during the panel discussion, do click raise hand, and then our friendly moderator Manoj Singh will invite you to unmute yourself and speak, and then you share who you are and which organization you are from. There is a photo session towards the end of the session, and then we'll inform you to post, don't worry. This will be followed by a request for a minute of your time to do a survey feedback for us. So now it is very important for me to invite our guest of honor, Mr. Eric Chua, Parliamentary Secretary of Ministry of Culture, Community and Youth, and Ministry of Social and Family Development, to give you the opening remarks. Over to you, Mr. Chua.
Thank you very much. And it's a great Friday and rainy morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here joining you today at this leadership conversation. And to begin the morning, I really like to begin with a quote, a favorite quote of mine by Barack Obama. And I quote, "Change will not come if we wait for some other people or some other time. We are the ones we have been waiting for. We are the change that we seek." And to borrow from Maxwell, a leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. We need leaders at all levels and in every part of society. Each and every one of you are leaders in your own right in the nonprofit sector, and the opportunity to transform our communities for the better and shape our collective future is in your hands. Now, the past 1.5 to 2 years have been difficult for everyone, especially so for nonprofits. Many of you have seen demand for your services increase, sometimes exponentially, and at the same time, your revenues and resources have been squeezed by COVID-19 and our safety measures. Now, you're most acutely aware of the many difficulties and challenges that our people face on a daily basis, and it is tough when you cannot help everyone. The leadership shown by those in the nonprofit sector since COVID struck has been outstanding. You have rallied courageously to meet the extra demands placed on you and your organizations. And in spite of all the challenges, you have forged ahead, supported communities that are hard hit by the pandemic. You have done what you did selflessly, and in so doing, exemplified our Singapore spirit. It has not been easy, but I thank and I commend all of you for everything that you're doing to help our society get through these uncertain times. Uncertain is indeed the operative word these days. While our government is doing its best to bring us all out of this pandemic, all of us are still finding ways and adjusting ourselves to adapt to the changing conditions brought about by the virus and its different variants. What we can say for certain is that we need good people, good leaders in every part of society who are able to make a difference beyond the immediate job scope. As current and future leaders of our nonprofit communities, we invite you to help chart the way forward in these uncertain times, And the key word here is adapt. Adapt to changing environments, new regulations, new ways of doing things. Adapt to scale up your operations, broaden your customer base, and provide different services. Adapt, because change will happen. And because no matter what the new normal looks like for nonprofits, we know it won't look like the old one. What should not change, however, are our principles. What you do affects people. It has the potential to change a life, a family's circumstances. Now, that is very powerful and it is a privilege. So continue to use it with integrity, compassion, and positively impact lives for the better. Let me give one example of how we are striving for positive change. Now, I strongly believe in the importance of mentoring our youth. I have been a mentor to many youth over the past years, including those from ITE, and I'm glad they have played a small part in supporting the life journeys as they are full of incredible potential. Earlier this year, MTCY and NYC, the National Youth Council, set up the Mentoring Alliance for Action, AFA, to galvanize a whole society partnership in strengthening the culture and ecosystem for youth mentoring. Within MSF, we are initiating a mentoring pilot for youth who leave ITE prematurely. Targeted to launch at the end of this year, this program aims to help about 100 youth expand their network of positive relationships and empower them to achieve their aspirations by broadening their exposure to opportunities, guiding them to explore their interests and career options, and facilitating internships and job placements. I'm personally very excited for this, and I'm very keen to see what can grow from this pilot. So you see, the work in this sector has so much potential to uplift those around us, and we need good leaders who are passionate about the issues at hand to be a guide in shifting circumstances. And which is why I'm glad that this conversation is being held with both Gen X and Gen Y leaders, not Gen X alone or Gen Y alone, but two generations of leaders in the same sector. I'm not so sure which band do I sit on, maybe across the two. But I think the sharing and exchanging of vastly different leadership experiences and learning from one another will be useful for everyone in the house. And there's another reason why this sharing of experience is important, which is that the challenges you have to adapt to are unlikely to be solved by any one organization alone. Your organizations will have to work together, and leadership in the new normal has to be collaborative. CNPL's Leadership Network, Leadership Alumni Network, is a good example of how this could come about. Comprising graduates from three different leadership programs, the network has a store of diverse leadership experiences and collective know-how. Many of you here today are part of this network, and I urge you to make the most of this opportunity, work together to explore how we together can tackle bigger problems and to make a more lasting impact. So in conclusion, I'd like to thank CNPL for organizing this, and I look forward to hearing from the panelists and all of you. It's exciting to think about what the future holds for the nonprofit sector under your collective leadership. And with that, thank you very much and have a good Friday.
Thank you for your opening remarks, Eric. Now I'll be handing over to Mr. Manoj Singh to bring on our panelists for the panel discussion. Manoj is a global HR leader in Shell and a member of the Leadership Alumni Working Group. Though Manoj has been in global leadership roles in corporate sector, he has always made time for volunteering. He is very committed to social change and has worked with charities in Singapore and abroad over the last 2 decades, including 10 years of being on the board of MICE. Manoj's experience as a global enterprise leader and as a HR leader of over 25 years with experience across areas such as leadership development, learning, diversity, inclusion, organizational change, and transformation, together with his experience with his NPO sector, made him able to see the common challenges and opportunities across corporate as well as the social service sectors. Over to you, please, Manoj.
Thank you, Stacey, for those kind words, and a very warm welcome on a rainy Friday morning to all of the panel members as well as Eric. Thank you for that fantastic opening, those set of opening remarks. So let me take a moment right now first to welcome our 4 other panelists. So we've got Grace Anchua, who's the co-founder of Friend Zone Singapore. Then there is Mr. Jairan Teo, President of the ASEAN Youth Organization. Ms. Irong Chong, who's the Vice Chair for NBPC and a board member of CERTIS. And Ms. Felicia Chua, the board member and for the Society for Continent Singapore, as well as a fellow Leadership Alumni Working Group member. As Eric rightly said, these are exemplary leaders who have exemplified our Singapore spirit and have been making a difference. So I'm really privileged to have you guys on the panel today. I will ask you guys to briefly introduce yourself and to make the Friday morning a fun morning, maybe throw in a fun fact about yourselves as well. Guys, I'm looking to you to bring in the sunshine today, yeah? So let's start with you, Grace. Could you briefly introduce yourself and just mention your leadership roles as well, yeah? Over to you, Grace.
Hi everyone, so I'm Grace. I'm one of the co-founders of Friend Zone, which is a social organization that connects young people in neighborhoods to make new friends. And we do this over meaningful conversations and fun activities. A fun fact about me is that I love Daisy Siew typing. Yeah, I'm just thinking about getting one after this call. Yeah, and I also rock climb. So if anyone wants to go rock climbing, can hit me up.
Cool. Thanks, Grace. Let's go over to Jairan.
Great, thanks. Great morning here, everyone. Good morning. Trying to make this quick. Myself, I'm Jairan, currently president and co-founder of ASEAN Youth Organization. We are based in Jakarta, Indonesia, since 2015. We've been empowering young people across Southeast Asia, and we want to. Our mission is really to impact 10 million lives by 2025 to provide quality education as well as employment opportunities. I realized, I only have 1 minute to share, and I think, from the various volunteering journey that I had and throughout, both, people sector and private sector, I kind of learned to live purposefully. And I think the best way we can serve is to focus on our strengths. And then on the receiving end, you'll definitely be a lot more valued in terms of what we are giving. And just want to share a few thoughts I have for the past few years of volunteering. It's really on, I think, of this word SEEF. Being a leader is really to serve. So to serve is to value add, to inspire, get inspiration for action, to empower stakeholders to make choices and decisions, to be vested in the cause, of course, and then enjoy the process. And I think one fun fact about me is that I just love to enjoy the morning sunshine. Unfortunately, I can't today because it's raining. So I wake up at 6:45 a.m., walk to the Pasir Ris Park where I live nearby, and then enjoy the sunshine. And that's something that actually kind of recharges me every day. So I get a lot more energized and start off the day well. Yeah, thanks.
Cool, fantastic. And I think the big operating word is serve out there. And indeed, as I think Eric also pointed out, you guys are making a big difference. So fantastic having you, Jairan. I will pass on to Felicia.
So morning, everyone. I'm Felicia. Currently, I'm actually serving on the board of Society for Continents. So Society for Continents is actually a place where we increase the awareness as well as to enhance the education of incontinence itself. So something that I learned when I was on the board with them was number one out of 7 Singaporean men actually suffers from incontinence. 1 out of 4 pregnant women suffers from it. 1 out of 3 Singaporeans, and the shocking thing is 1 out of 2 women above the age of 60. So along the side, when I was serving in Society for Continents, I think I learned a lot of things about leadership. Simply because, for example, while it is an organization, we basically has a lot of regional meeting, congresses, and symposium. And being a group of working with a group of really wonderful nurses and doctors who knows their work, right? Our organization managed to actually inspire the people around the region to say that, hey, Singapore, do you mind taking the lead in creating educational materials and symposium further for this very niche, very specific industry and sector of the healthcare? And so this year we are actually doing our inaugural Asia Nursing Congress. Yeah. So a little bit about myself, a fun fact. I actually asked my friends just recently, like, what's one fun fact about me? And then they said, Felicia, do you know you drink mayonnaise? And then I thought, wow, yeah, I do drink mayonnaise. I drink mayonnaise more than I eat fries. So over to yourself again, Manojit.
All right, Felicia, thank you very much. I will pass on to Irong.
Good morning, everyone. For the avoidance of doubt, I think I was invited onto this panel because I represent Gen X. So I'm just going to put it out there. But I'm delighted to be here. Wonderful group, wonderful cause, wonderful initiative. For me, so my role is I'm the vice chair, recently the vice chair for the NVPC. So the NVPC is the steward for the company of good, for the city of good. And within that, we're basically trying to build Singapore into using individuals, organizations, and leaders into a giving nation. So it's a very easy cause. And when I was asked to support, it was a definite big fat, resounding yes. I would say that the conversation today in terms of leadership, super interesting. I don't want to give away our sort of discussion points for later. But leadership really isn't about leadership, and we did discuss this earlier, but not just leadership in the social services sector, but leadership in everyday. So whether it's your everyday life, whether it's in your corporate life, whether it's in your private life, but really it's about the value system that you hold true to yourself. And I'm looking forward to unpacking all that. The fun fact I would say is that I'm what is the word I'm looking for? So a perfectionist baker. So firstly, I'm a terrible cook. So I can't cook, but I like to bake. And what happens is every so often I get into these spurts of baking, whether it's apple pie or chocolate cake or something, and I'll bake for 10 cakes and I'll get the recipe to a really good place, and then I'll never bake it again. So if you catch me in the period of the 10 bakes, then I literally bake and give away because my family says, enough, can you, mix it up a little bit? Anyway, so yeah, fun fact. Back to you, Manojit.
Awesome, Irang. Let us know when you're baking next. We'll line up outside, yeah? All right. Hey, thank you, guys. I think you've already added a bit of color and a bit of light to the conversation. As Stacey mentioned, the objective for today's session is really to have a better understanding of the differences and commonalities, I guess, among at least Gen X and Y. I've seen Mr. Che has pointed out that there are other generations present here. Absolutely. I mean, we've got multiple generations in today's conversation, but we are putting the limelight, I guess, on X and Y, and particularly with respect to leadership. And what we'd like to hear from the panel members is what has made them the leaders that they are today, irrespective of which generations they are from. Now, to be honest, when I first was asked about this topic, I was kind of scratching my head thinking, who is Gen X? Which X am I? X or Y or Z, or which am I on? And of course, there are alpha, betas, and others as well. So I think it's a good idea that we kind of demystify the Gen X and Y and just make the divide a bit clearer so that Irong is not the only one who's kind of holding the fort on Gen X. So, of course, there are different definitions and boundaries, but what's broadly accepted is that Gen X are those who are born from the 1965 to the 1980. So it's kind of that 15-year time window. And Gen Y, who are also called millennials, and we hear that term very much. So Gen Y is the same as millennials, are those who are born from 81 to 96, again, a 15-year time horizon. Now, it is Strauss and Howe, who are social historians, who actually made these terms kind of popular. They are known for pioneering this generational theory. And what they had to do, of course, is bring in several generalizations in order to be able to compare and contrast different generations based on, I would say, whatever are stereotypes, yeah? So first word of caution is that these are what I'm going to share with you, or what we're going to be hearing today, are broad generalizations and are not universal truths. But I think I found very interesting as I was reading through and educating myself on some of this generational research, I found, one, there is just loads of information. I found it very helpful to read in one particular write-up in a couple of minutes to you, yeah? So Gen X, according to Strauss and Howe, is a nomad generation and is characterized by a general disdain for everything that hatred of the baby boomers, that's the previous generation, can be seen everywhere, from politics to music. Now, some of us were responding to the music just before and being asked the question, which generation is it from? I think I put my hand up. So Gen Xers like myself, we transformed rock and roll from cutesy swinging, which was the previous generation, to angry screaming, and brought in punk, metal, and grunge into the world. Yay! Yeah. Now, as individuals, Gen Xers are known to be nihilistic and cynical, because the earlier generation and left a lot of stuff behind. So by the time we folks came of age, we had things like the experience of the Cold War, the fall of things like the Berlin Wall, a series of economic crises, and if you all remember the AIDS epidemic. These all happened in, I think, our lifetimes as the Gen Xers. Now, Gen Xers may have been hellraisers as youth, but as they moved into middle age, they have become more responsible and are trying to fix the mistakes of the previous generation made in society. And that's probably made more pragmatic and hard not mess with, yeah? Now, Gen Ys are supposed to have led a charmed life. Their parents are people who had ready access to birth control, so they are generally wanted, nurtured children. They are more sheltered by society than their predecessors, and their family units were more stable. Terms that you hear about, of course, are helicopter parents and soccer moms, because those are for children of this generation. So Gen Y is sometimes known also as the Peter Pan generation, because childhood was so good to them that they had a tendency to delay adulthood. But when they do come of age, they earn their I must say, but they are united by a deep-seated idealism and desire to save the world. And I think we see a lot of evidence of that around. So looking at something like climate change or global recession, a millennial just doesn't blame the past, but looks forward to the solutions of the future. So I think I want to echo Eric's words that I think all generations bring in their strengths, and we have to collaborate. Yeah. Problems of society, problems we have anywhere, including in Singapore, I don't think are meant for any one generation to fix. Now, so you think about Xers as the people who will tear down the entrenched institutions of the boomers, and the millennials who are the ones who will kind of return a bit of stability to the chaos. So those of us who are from either of these generations will probably be able to identify some aspects of these descriptions. But that's also what I meant when I said these are generalizations and not continue. So Felicia, what got you into the social sector was what I intended to ask you. Over to you.
Actually, Manoj, so what got me into the sector, right? Which is pretty much what you have described. Okay, so basically what happens is that my mom, she really volunteers a lot. Like as young as like 5 years old, she would bring me to the places that she volunteers, whether it's at nursing home, whether it's at booths. And being a child, I'll just follow where my mom goes. So this is like what you said about Gen Y. And then after that, I think when I was studying during our CCA days, during the period that I was in, MOE was also very, very specific about how we have to volunteer our services. And I think with that, together with the family and together with my schooling experience, I kind of just very smoothly, just go into social work and services. But actually, Manoj, just now you were saying halfway about Generation Y, and then you were telling us about Generation X about tearing down. Probably you could share a little bit more about the Generation Y, X to tearing down whatever that the institution of the boomers and the millennial are the ones who will rebuild the rumbles. Maybe we can take it from there, and then I will tell you my observation. How about that?
Why don't you continue? I'd love to hear from you what examples you see in Singapore. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what happens is that for myself, then over the years, actually, I started to think about leadership. And then I was looking at this social service work at the same time. So I have a very personal observation and a very quick one, which is not, I mean, as in this is just personal. So what happens is that I kind of felt that because of the generation that I was in and the environment that we were in, it was a very beginning stage. So MOE was also not very strict about making it like, okay, you need to volunteer, and then we will give you points to minus, as you go on to your secondary school, or to give you extra additional bullets. But then subsequently, when I kind of look at my brother and my younger cousins, I start to realize that, oh dear, the school made it a mandate for us to basically ensure that these people are doing volunteering work. And over time, I kind of felt that while they are trying to build a generation of leaders, I also kind of noticed that they started to do it because they just want to shine. So with this, right, maybe I have to ask the rest of the panelists, what do they think about my observation? Yeah.
That's a great point, Felicia, and a fantastic observation. So maybe we'll turn on to, well, Irong maybe. Two questions for you, Irong. Then what first got you into the social services sector? And do you agree with Felicia?
So I think I can answer both questions with my sharing. So I obviously grew up in a time where there was no point system. There was no requirement from an MOE standpoint to do anything. And, I'm actually going through, I'm not going through PSLE, but I have a son doing PSLE. So we have 7 weeks to go, and then I'm having a party on the 5th of October, which is when PSLE ends, just to share with everyone. But, again, the education system at the time, there was no requirement for us to do any, outside extracurricular social services. So how I fell into it actually was in my corporate life. And I would say that for all intents and purposes, I'm one of those very regular, extremely boring sort of, Asian kids where you go to school, you go to university, you graduate, you get a job, you're either a banker, lawyer, doctor, or engineer. I went into banking. I, did 5 years of that, came into, an agency environment. So, did all the right things as in ticking the boxes. The idea, and I'm embarrassed to say this because of the audience that I'm talking to, but the idea of the external, being more aware was not there because it was all about, you have to, my parents are, be educated, you go out there and get a good job. I did exactly that. But something happened, I would say, about, I'm going to say 7 to 8 years ago, where I felt that there was something that was missing in my career trajectory. And I kind of fell into, and this is where, my love affair with NBPC started, but I was roped in to participate, not as the MD of a company, not as a corporate director or something or other, but as a mom. And at the time, my son was in school and he was experiencing bullying in schools. So I was asked to come in and participate as a mother in a workshop to discuss how we can create programs to basically combat anti-bullying in schools. I came, loved it, suddenly, this whole new world opened up. And so I think maybe just to stop here and pause and say that, obviously the things that we choose to spend our time with have to be things that resonate with us. And the minute that happens, you will literally take flight. So that's the first thing. The second part, sort of to maybe address a little bit of Felicia, is there's a lovely quote which I love, which is, integrity is doing the right thing even when no one is watching. So, school curriculum or not, I mean, that's irrelevant to me. I think it should be irrelevant to the individual, because I think over time you will see the sincerity and the authenticity of why you give and why you do what you do. Yeah. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Irong. And it's interesting hearing Felicia talk about volunteering being primarily something that was encouraged by MOE to almost becoming a mandate, and you talking about, I guess, the system also turning, the wheels turning in a way where people are bringing in people as volunteers in order to participate and to really be part of the solution as opposed to just doing it for their own sake. Fantastic. How about you, Grace? What has been your observation?
Thanks so much for actually sharing that introduction, Manoj. It was really interesting for me because, I mean, I'm a Gen Y, I'm on the tail end of Gen Y, and I've never really thought so much about how, so a big part of the work I'm doing now is focused on building neighborhood communities, right? And essentially that's bringing back the kampong spirit for youth and young adults. So our target group that we focus on is about building friendships between youth between the ages of 16 to 35. And when you're sharing that about the previous generations and tearing it down and trying to rebuild it again, I think what struck me was that, I mean, the concept of the kampong spirit is not unfamiliar, right, to generations before my generation. And some of the common narratives that we hear are like, oh yeah, my grandparents know all the neighbors, my parents know all the neighbors, but I don't know anyone in my neighborhood. Or when you speak to people in the older generation in neighborhoods about why they don't see youth involved, they will always say, oh, because young people are too busy with work, too busy with school to care about community or getting to know their neighbors or being involved in grassroots work. And so that got me thinking, like, why is that the case, right? What happened in the generation as the generations went by? Was it like changes in housing structure, right? Was it programmatic opportunities changing? Was it because a big part of maybe like residential committees or grassroots committees were made up of older generations and there wasn't enough like involvement of youths that they would take ownership such that now a lot of activities aren't really organized by youth for youth in neighborhoods. So typically it's like that tends to be a grassroots committee which is mostly made of seniors. And it's hard for seniors to organize activities that would excite youth, right? So it's easier to attract and organize activities that you yourself are familiar with or would resonate with your age demographic. Or perhaps about how I noticed that quite a lot of youth networks in the neighborhood space are made of youths that don't necessarily stay in their own neighborhood. So I'm not speaking for like all of the youth networks that I see, but in my context, like I stay in Marine Parade, and I'm actually involved in the Marine Parade Youth Network. But I think about at least half maybe of the people in the Marine Parade Youth Network don't live in Marine Parade, right? So that got me thinking, like, how did the system evolve in a way, how did things happen such that what was very strong once in the previous generation, like the neighborliness, community spirit, has shifted such that now in this generation, the work I'm doing is focused on creating opportunities for young people to form friendships in the neighborhoods. So I guess that was like a thought that came to my mind as you were sharing.
Sure.
The second thought that I wanted to respond to was about the point system that was mentioned by Felicia. I do think that in my own experience, like growing up in secondary school or primary school and doing like volunteering for points, I don't think those activities are particularly meaningful. Like you just did it because you needed to like clock in the hours. But I do notice that in general, when youth find or volunteer for something that they are personally have experience with, similar to what Yurong mentioned about finding something that resonates with you. Like if you can identify a cause that impacts your own life, for example, if your sibling is affected by cancer, then you would want to get involved with that particular cause because it's so much more personal. And I think for me, like the reason why I'm passionate about building youth neighborhood communities is because when I was in university, I lived on campus and I experienced a very strong sense of community with other young people. And that was why I feel like I had that experience and I have that passion to want to create that and see that in other neighborhoods across Singapore, not just like campus life, but the context is slightly different. Yeah, so those are my thoughts from everyone sharing so far.
Great. No, I think, and I'm listening to 2 points and I feel so heartened to hear that, volunteering rather than it being mandated or just encouraged by somebody from higher up or some authority or MOE or whatever is now taking the shape of people wanting to help themselves as well. So a bit like what Eric was mentioning in Barack Obama's quote, which was, be the change that you want to be. And I'm hearing that message coming through. So that's almost taking a full circle, which is fantastic. And I now want to, I guess, in the interest of time, move over to you, Jaron. What's been your experience, both on the generational aspects and any particular observations on differences as you've seen in Singapore?
Wow, okay. So maybe for everyone to also understand more about what we do. Actually, at our Singapore organization, our engagement is a lot of young people, 35 and under. Right. And it's really throughout the region. I think I speak to more Indonesians, Filipino, Vietnamese, now a lot of Burmese as well, that compared to Singaporeans at my work at our Singapore organization. Okay. So maybe I just share more about my other volunteering engagements and I think that will help you guys to understand a bit more about my perspective when interacting with other generations. And I think one of the first answer your first question towards why I go into the social sector. So long story short, I guess it really comes down from the values that I've been brought up with. And I think in primary school, because I started even in kindergarten, my parents sent me to Chinese martial arts training and all that. And then, in primary school itself, and when I got a bit older, being able to understand more about all the different values and able to comprehend that, not to the full extent, but at least, through those live performances we do. And then also I remember every, you call it a Dragon Boat Festival or Tuan Wu Jie, basically the festival on the fifth day of the fifth month in the Chinese calendar, where you give out dumplings, right? So if you guys remember that day, and then we'll be distributing food to the community. So that kind of gives me the satisfaction. Oh wow, these people are appreciating what I'm doing for them. So, and then also seeing a lot of younger, older people at various ages or so, they're sharing with us, even though I think at that point in primary school I don't really quite understand, but then just that look from them, that it just gives me a lot of satisfaction of what I'm doing. And then it's really on a values on empathy and giving. So that's kind of what I learned through my primary school. And in secondary school, I think, through my engagements, I was in the Boys Brigade. So, taught a lot about, we have a share a gift, we have character education, really learning about serving, willing to serve without expecting anything in return, which is really important. And then I went on to poly, really learning about serving a positive outcome, for the receiving end, because realized that it's not just about serving blindly, but you got to make sure that the person receiving that from you really truly be valued, or the life probably improved, right? It's not something that you just do it for the sake of doing so. And I think that's where throughout that period of time in between, serving on National Youth Council, Young Change Makers, then NIBO, and for the Young NTUC, and then ACE Youth Wing, then Junior Chamber International was something interesting. So they are like over 100 years old. And I joined them in 2014, and that's where you have like generations of leaders, right, from Singapore coming together, coming back as advisors, even though they passed away age, over the age of 40, where they are no longer part of the community, but they still came back advisors, or sort of called senators. And that's where I learned so much from them, because they are so willing to share. And it's something that, I think Eric was saying earlier on about mentoring, right? So I think the whole mentoring initiative from MCCY side is really important, because they had kind of like overview. I mean, knowledge lies in the field. I think that's the key thing, where we want to also share down the best practices with the younger folks. I think so far my work with people from Gen X and even the boomers, if you call them, they have been very giving. I think it's a good thing, because I enjoy hearing them, hearing their stories, and even that got me into speaking closer to my grandparents, because it's dating and all that, and my grandparents just be sharing with me about how he managed to court my grandma, watching her across the street, packing the food. And then having to entertain her father, so it's and all that. So I think that's kind of like something that I observed, where I think the older generation and working with them actually helps you shorten your learning curve by a lot. So you shouldn't kind of like despise that, oh, you don't know what you're doing, it's not going to be innovative and all that. But you got to bear in mind that back then in that generation, whatever they've done is actually a new innovation, right? And it works, right? It may not work perfectly well in this generation, but definitely there are some learning points, especially that relationship part of things, that soft skills part of things, that you can actually gain value from it. And yeah, that's the key thing. And I want to also point out something, right? Because Grace mentioned about here on the tail end of Gen Y. So similarly like me, 95, and then right till end. And I think there can be another generation of sorts, like maybe YZ, where we are in between both generation, and we really see something different. We kind of find there's a space where we can connect the dots. I think that's something that maybe in the next few questions or opportunities to share, I think that would be great, because we can see that those at the tail end, every generation do have something in common with the previous generation, and they can be the connectors connect and bridge the generation gap, which is really important in working in such diverse community right now. Yeah.
Fantastic, great stuff, Jiren. Now, in the interest of time, let me turn over to Eric, who's raised his hand. Eric, you had something to share, I guess?
Yeah, so I just want to give a kind of a personal response to what has been said so far. I mean, a lot of what you have said really inspired a lot of thoughts in me. I can only hope to arrange those thoughts in a coherent manner, right? So the first point, you know, I think I just want to give a high five to you. You know, I'm one of those who like kind of went through the system, ticked through all the checkboxes, you know, passed each exam, and then just went on and so-called sailed through. And I think there's also a feature of our system that I think we need looking into, but I'm not sure whether we can look at it systematically. And that is the fact that I do believe that, you know, our moments of epiphany, the moments where you mentioned actually a whole new world coming through, right, in front of your eyes, and our moment where we get, oh, okay, this is what I want to do. And I would term them as what Bennis calls the crucible experience. So we go through something in life. So it could be what Grace mentioned about if there's a family member who has cancer, and then look, this is the cause they're going to be passionate about. I think we are sort of so clinical in our approach to life here in Singapore that sometimes those crucible experiences don't really come forth. And I do think that's also why probably, I wasn't in MOE then, I can't speak for MOE even now, that we try to have some of this experience, some of these experiences coming in. So when I was in secondary school, I must confess, I also had to do community service. I didn't enjoy one moment of it at a time. So sometimes it's also a little bit about, you know, the level of maturity that you're at, you know, at the moment where you are given the experience or you're made to go through the experience. So at that time, I remember telling myself, I was like, my thought bubble was, why do I even have to do this? Okay, I'm just going to endure this 50 minutes, this 1 hour at the school that we were supposed to go to. It's a special needs school. But that was me at the time when I was 15 years old. But hey, when I came into contact with similar activities when I was, you know, almost 10 years later, 24, 25, my perception of that was totally different. And I think, but the prior experience when I was 15 gave me a little bit of context as to how I can react, how I can respond to students in those settings. So I thought that is the intent. I'm not so sure whether it worked for everyone. I'm quite sure it didn't work for me at the time when I was 15, but I sure hope that it helps to bring out some of these moments, aha moments or moments of enlightenment to our young ones. And to the point about youth not being in our respective neighborhoods, I think that this is Grace's point. There's so many distractions today, right? We are all super uber connected. If I were to add a little bit to what Manoj said in the front loader, right, about the difference between Gen Y and the difference between Gen Y and Gen X. To me, the key difference is I'm a Gen Xer, the tail end of Gen X. I'm with you, you know, and I think one of the key differences is that Gen X versus Gen Y. Gen X is a digital migrant, and Gen Ys will probably be digital natives. It's so comfortable with you know, your Instagrams, TikTok, and whatnot. I admittedly had to learn my Instagram throughout the past year, the different features. Just to learn to do an Instagram story, I had to confess that it was intimidating at first. Until I got a hang of it, I just flooded the world with my Instagram stories, of course. So I think there's so many distractions. Like if you're doing esports, e-gaming, it could be connecting with youth, not even in Singapore, but youth in Vietnam, in Philippines, in Indon, where some of these esports are actually quite popular. So the world's our oyster. I think that's the world that our youngsters, our Gen X, our Gen Y, I'm sorry, and our millennials are living in. So it's quite a different playground, if you will, for our youngsters today. So that's all I'll say, and I'll zip here for now.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. And I loved absolutely your sharing. And I think it really, some of the points you've made, I think many of us can resonate with. Now, I do want to bring in a slightly different voice as well into the conversation. There's Dr. Che, who has, I think, shared on chat about the presence of other generations. Hey, Dr. Che, if you're around, would you like to just share, would you come off mute and share your perspective as you're listening to this conversation?
Well, thanks very much, Manoj. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm from the pioneer generation. I have got 3 grandchildren, another one on the way. So when I saw this topic that Stacy sent over to me and asked me whether I'm interested, I thought that I'm surely out of place, right? You guys are all Gen X, Gen Y, millennial. What is this old man doing here, you know? But when I heard the conversations, Eric and Yi Rong and Grace and all that, suddenly it appears to me that the pioneer generation also has a voice, right? We also had our own challenges when we stepped into this social service sector. Sorry if my voice is cracking. Old man like that, you know. So when we were in school, we did not have all these things about your CCA and all that. There was no pressure. Just get through the exams, go and get a job because the family needs your financial support. That was all. That was the only priority, right? So how we got into social service really stumbling into it. There was no plan to it, right? We just got introduced by friends. For myself, it was one of my salesmen who brought me into Lions Club, right? I went for lunch and suddenly I found all these people asking me to join. And then, okay, join, you know. But then suddenly it dawned on me at that time, about 30 years ago, that there was another thing to do about our lives, that is caring for other people besides our own family. So that resonated with some of us, not everybody. A lot of people still were struggling with bread and butter issues, but some of us thought that, you know, we should do something more than just caring for our own, right? So we also had our challenges, okay? Mainly was money, right? Time. Because as you're growing up, you start a family, you got a lot of other commitments, looking after children, then wives will be, sorry, don't mean to say anything about women, but so a lot of these factors bothered people of my generation, mainly economic issues, and you don't know who to support because there's so many needy people out there in society. Who to support? Fortunately, the government did a great job in identifying issues. They did spend a lot of time and effort and money in supporting many groups. And we ourselves as individuals knew, you know, what we wanted to do, but it took a lot of time. So when you guys were talking about your challenges, you know, when Jaren was talking about, you know, youth in various countries coming together, I thought that was a fantastic initiative, right? Now, my challenge today, after having spent 20 over years in social service, you know, I've been president of my club, Lions Club, 3 times. Now I'm the current secretary. The biggest challenge that I have today is when very many other diverse interests, right? So a lot of commitment, a lot of communication needs to be done. You need to tell people what you are doing, right? And you need to convince people that your cause is as worthy as any other. And then all these young people, Gen X, Gen Y, they have got so many choices, right, to choose from, and you have got to prioritize your time. Enough? Thanks.
Good stuff. Thank you. Thanks so much, Dr. Dr. Che rather. So I absolutely loved the point you made about, you know, the priorities. And I think each generation has to look at its priorities and to be able to make sense of, you know, what would they spend their time on. And that brings me to, I guess, the whole topic of leadership. And as much as we talk from a generational perspective of differences, etc., I believe that there are some interesting commonalities when it comes to leadership across generations. I go back to, I mean, there are very many leadership models. I go back to a very simple model that was developed at MIT and involves 4 key capabilities. One is sense making. really looking at the environment and saying, what is my priority? Where would we spend our time on, among other things? How would my organization need to operate in this new context? The second is one of visioning, really developing a view of the future and bringing people along onto that. The third is relating to others, bringing in empathy, vulnerability, examples that we've seen today from people's really honest stories of how they've shaped themselves, their influences, etc. And last but not the least, inventing new ways of getting things done. Each generation has had to find new ways of getting things done. So I want to pause here and I guess ask the panel members again, if you guys also feel that leadership really, or many aspects of leadership are essentially common across generations. Shall I start with you, Jaren? I mean, what's your view? And let's keep it brief because we don't have a lot of time, yeah?
Understand the short time. Anyway, I just want to share that I guess across generation leadership, one thing in common is definitely be their willingness to serve. So that is one thing for sure. Every generation, especially, we're all in the social service sector, we all want to serve, and I guess we're just doing different means, right? But the solution, is like, if this person needs food to survive another day, definitely, the food bank and all that, various organizations are doing this to help them to get over this tough time. I think one thing that would be interesting to note is that the approach to do that, right? Be it you're mentioning about digital natives, and then getting onto digital platforms to then find ways to reach out to these people in need. I think that approach may be a bit different, but then again, I can see nowadays the older generation that I'm engaging with, they are more willing to get online. Why? Because they want to connect with their grandchildren, which I think Dr. Che definitely have, can relate with that. And even now, my cousins, they are like young, under 12 years old. They're all taking on iPads and teaching me how to use certain apps, Roblox and all that. And I think it's really incredible because they are actually teaching my grandparents, and that also saved me, and I don't have to do the job to teach. So I think that is a great thing, because then that's how different generations are connecting, because they want to engage the communication in a meaningful relationship. And I really want to I saw this online. I think it's really great. I think we shouldn't make the Wi-Fi the only connection we make every day. It's more than just connect to the Wi-Fi, we connect with people. So I think through this social service work, we can do that a lot better. Yeah, thanks.
Oh, thank you. And indeed, I think one key point in there is that every generation has been serving and has served. It might be done differently, and it might have, as Dr. Che was saying, the priority was perhaps to serve the family and the immediate community, because one had different struggles and challenges in the pioneer generation than perhaps Jaren, your generation, or your 12-year-old cousin's generation, who have the time and the knowledge to be able to teach your grandparents Roblox as well. So yeah, absolutely. Hey, Grace, what's your view?
I was actually going to say I'll pass on this question and hand over the time to Felicia or Yurong.
Okay, Felicia?
Sure. So for me, as I was listening to the entire conversations that we have, I think we picked up a few points. First and foremost, we start from the sensing portion, where we were in the social service sector. And so what I find is that, how did we all end up serving? It is, number one, we definitely found something that's close to our heart. Then what I was trying to bring across was also that it was the environment that was being built in. And like my mother, she mentored me. And along the way, through good mentorship, I began to realize that, I really enjoy this circle. And while we actually go to different spaces to volunteer. So my mom volunteered a lot in medical circle, but for myself, I love people. So I love to do people work. And over time, I go to realize that I love the youth. Why? Because I have this mandate, and I feel that what is very important in leadership is precisely that there is someone either within the group who has the vision, or there is a more senior person who is able to volunteer the time and to share their experiences. And I feel that I'm not able to solve the problems of tomorrow for the younger generation. But definitely, I think it's very important that I will have the mandate, the vision to think about how do I want to change the brief at where I'm standing. Then when we come into a communication with our youth, our younger people, or whoever that is in that sector that we're trying to save, trying to help, trying to give, they will come up with the solution together, and we then come together to change the brief in that sense. So when it comes to leadership, especially in the social service sector, I find that it's pretty important for us to ask, to really think about it, like, who is it that we are serving? What are we serving? Is it the task, or is it the people themselves? And where is it that they want to go? Because much of the time, sometimes where they want to go is not where you want to go. So with this as a leader, I realized that understanding our position is very important. In some structures, we are there to restructure, to recalibrate an organization. In some places, we are there to do pioneering work, to open up green field. So in some places, you are just there to encourage the team that is in crisis. So to sum it up, I find that leadership in social work is also very interesting, simply because we are very, very short of resources in the social services. And when that happens, I find that the need for good mentors are very important. They really cut short the thing. They allow us to bring in resources together to build forward. And I think my love for social work was really, I'm just thankful that I met very, very good mentors in my life. Yeah. That's my thought about over generation. What is something that's important and salient, and the task and the issue that we'll face, it will change.
Thank you, Felicia. Hey, Yurong, anything else to add?
I think maybe I'm going to make a comment and then sort of jump into the next sort of topic area, which is the, what makes successful leaders. So I'm going to put my hand up and say that leadership didn't come naturally to me. By nature, I was very introverted. I know it's hard to tell on Zoom, but it wasn't something that I got up and someone told a story about when they were 5 years old, they got up in front of kindergarten and decided to change the world. That is not my story, and that's not my journey. And I sort of landed into a combination of mentorship, a combination of what was the word, Eric, that you said, crucible, was that right? Situations that really sort of brought things together. And I found my voice because I was motivated by seeing unfairness or inequity in the world. And why is it that I was born here in a developed country and not in a village somewhere in destitution? Why not that? So what is it that made me or allowed me to be born in this current environment? So, I'm sort of straddling the question earlier and then sort of the moving ahead topic. So what I will say to the audience here really is that it's not we don't get a label that says, hey, you, Yurong, Felicia, you are leaders. I mean, no one anoints us that way. It is literally that you get up, every single day, and there is an innate desire to want to do something to make the world better. And then if, you happen to be in a position where you can use your influence to spread that joy, then why not? So I'm going to share a very simple thing that I make my children do, which they get super annoyed with. And so again, it's like, I've done things where I've set up diversity and inclusion, communities. I believe in, so many different things I'm very passionate about. But, and this is before the migrant worker situation in Singapore. We used to go for a walk and we walk past, workers. And I would say, eye contact, say good morning. So I have this thing called a good morning campaign with my children. It's just my thing. It's every person you walk past, say good morning, doesn't matter who. And sometimes you talk to someone, a construction person, and you look them in the eye and you say, good morning, uncle, from a 8-year-old kid or a 6-year-old kid back then. And you know what? They're humans too, we're all humans. And it's literally that interaction that you have, which is good. And good morning to every single person. That we would go, my children hate walking with me, just so you know, because they have to say good morning a lot. But it's basic courtesy. It's about, treating people with kindness. So again, I just want to end off this particular section to say that, leadership was not something that I decided one day I'm going to be a leader. I found my voice because I was backed into a corner. I felt that there was a lot of unfairness and inequality in a particular situation. I said, okay, I want to do something about it. So whoever's on the call today, if that is something that you feel and it drives you and fuels you, then you're absolutely in the right place.
Awesome. Absolutely. And I'm just conscious of time, so I will actually take your cue Irong, on the next segment where I've tipped you guys that I want to hear from each of you, perhaps one thing that has made you a good leader. I won't call you great because I'm sure you will feel like that's probably too much of a burden if I call you all great leaders, which I'm sure you are. But for you, in terms of becoming a good leader, what's one thing that has helped you? So if you could just do a quick 1 minute and go for it, any one of you who feels like, and I will turn to Eric as well, if you're okay with Eric, sharing one thing that has made you a good leader.
I can go first. So I think that one thing that's made me a good leader is realizing that I have a team with me. You know, I think one of the lies I think that someone said to me when I was younger is that leadership is lonely. And I didn't realize that I subconsciously believed that until one leadership experience when I was in university. And I think the real takeaway from that is that leadership is not lonely, that I have a team that I can work with, that the weight of the amount of work to be done towards the goals that we have is not meant to be carried by myself alone. And part of being a leader is working with your team, right? And encouraging your team and journeying with your team and activating the people into their right roles. As well as that, I have peers, I have other leaders as well who can share my struggles and my challenges and my worries and my joys with me. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you know, the visually, I always look at it like this, that this used to be the model of leadership. It was always a kind of a hierarchy and you had a pyramid. Things are flattening now. Increasingly, we are living in a world which is much more democratized and leadership is distributed. And I think the sooner older folks like me, I guess, get onto it, the more we will be able to get people engaged and get participation going and get the best out of people and get them to deliver the best that they have so much potential to deliver. So it's very fundamental that we do not believe that, you know, we are up there anointed, to use Irong's word, you know, someone who's coming in with some kind of big mantle and nobody else deserves that. I think that model of leadership has changed. So I absolutely love the point you've made, Grace. Who wants to go next? Felicia?
For me, a good leadership, one of the better leaders that I've met, right, are those who really listen to the heart of the team. So aligning myself with Grace, it is indeed true that it is a team, but at the same time, I find that good leadership, having the vision to have good leadership is very important, because the vision is the one that sets everyone in the same direction. But that vision has to be shared across everybody that we have on the team. And in that sense, there's a lot of hearing, a lot of empathy, and there must be a lot of authenticity. So otherwise, I find that in terms of leadership, if it's like, you know, we are just put on a high pedestal and we just want to lead and dictate, then I think it becomes very self-serving and very hollow for myself. That's my experience. And I would sum it up, I'll say it's really humility, authenticity, and empathy to replace the pride that is with us. So leadership for me, very, very, very sadly, one of the most unfortunate experience I have with leadership was that my pride was just placed right in front of my face, and like, oh, I'm so ugly. And along the way, that becomes a journey, and I start to really understand that actually as leaders, somehow we do struggle like the next person. And it is wonderful to have a platform like that to discuss, to converse and to hear from each other. Yeah. Absolutely. So with this, I'm very thankful for my journey as well.
No, fantastic. Again, I mean, being vulnerable, being authentic with oneself and with our people around makes us so much more accessible to people. So even if one knows the way, in the way we show the way, we can be more humble about things. Because if we can do that, then I think people will follow. We will have willing followers, not people who are doing it out of fear of authority or whatever. So you make fantastic points. Jaren, you've come off mute, so go for it.
Yeah, because I think what Felicia shared is definitely something I want to echo. The empathy part is really important. And I think I also want to clarify on, like, when you talk about team, right? So I think, you know, my team is not just about, you know, having a group of people working together. I think a team is really a group of people that really can trust each other to achieve that desired outcome as one. And really, I think for successful leaders or good leaders that we look up to is that, you know, anyone can make mistakes and everyone should, and we should embrace that, right? But the thing is that good leaders and people will actually learn from them, whereas unsuccessful people really don't. So creating the environment is very important. And I think one other thing is I learned throughout my leadership experience is that when things goes well, everyone's celebrating. But as a leader, when things go south, you have to take responsibility and you have to be the one that be the face of everyone else and say, hey, sorry, it's my fault. I own up. I didn't do a good job. I will do better next time. So I think that's the key thing. Being that leader and really just try to take small steps, be 1% better every single day, and that will make your life a lot better and people around you. Yeah.
Superb points. I'm a great believer in teams, and I do not, there's a fine line between leading a team and abdicating responsibility. So you're absolutely right. How do you have the team's back when things are not so good? As much as, of course, bring them along. It's a fine art, but that's what leadership is about. It's really taking responsibility. Iran, anything else? And then I'll turn over to Eric for a final word. Yeah, we're really running out of time. Yeah.
No, I'm good. Thank you. Eric, over to you.
All right, Eric.
All right, I'm just going to shamelessly borrow a quote that Jaren has used earlier. Don't make Wi-Fi the only connection that you make every day. And I think it's so important that we are constantly in touch with not just our team, the people that we serve, the various people that you work with on a day-to-day basis, your partners, and no doubt on a personal basis. I will want to say this, that, it is the connection that we make with people that has allowed me over time to realize, and this is in relation to your earlier question, Manoj, my own true north as well, that actually my real passion lies with serving people. And I realized that over my past, 17 years in the Civil Defense Force. I realized that over my past years of community service in the grassroots, and also more recently, but definitely not the least importantly, is my mentoring of ITE students. And I just allow me to quote one example. I've always had a thing about our IT students, and I made a speech in Parliament right earlier this year about how society still feels or still perceives that ITE equates is the end. ITE, no hope. And I made a speech in Parliament, and after I made a speech, there was a session I caught up with my mentees, and then one of my mentees came up to me and said, "Hey, Eric, that thing you said in Parliament, very true. What did I say? I said, sometimes at Chinese New Year dinners, right? If there are brave parents who say that, okay, yeah, my son just enrolled in ITE. And then what almost always happens after that is that it will be awkward silence until some very jovial member of the family cracks a joke, and then everybody moves on with the conversation. Because there's that awkwardness and there's that stigma associated with being an IT student. And my mentee coming up to me after that speech, telling me that, hey, what you said is true. I mean, I knew it's true, that's why I said it, I raised it in Parliament, but having that toy in my face just makes me so, I was heartbroken for a split second at the time. And it just makes me all the more resolute to want to speak up for them, for the IT students. And I think it goes back to the connection that Jaren talks about, the connection that we make with every single human being that we meet, that we meet with, that we serve, that we work with in our lives, to be able to understand each other better as fellow human beings, not you and I, not different races, different organizations, and if we can shed all those aside, I think that will truly unleash the real potential of what we can all achieve in our respective areas.
Absolutely. Thank you, Eric. Really loved what you said. And I think my model of Singapore as a developed country is one where beyond just caring for ourselves, we are able to care for people around and the wider humanity. And I see wonderful examples in the work that all of you are doing. I mean, Jaren, your work, and I guess the work of all of the panel members, etc., is much beyond ourselves. And that's my model of a great country, of a developed nation. So I want us to keep doing that. And Eric, thank you so much for being, again, the ambassador for, work that needs to be done. Courage is very important in leadership, and we all have to take moments to be courageous and speak up for what we know to be true. So with that said, I think it's time we also did a bit of a quick poll with the lovely audience we've got here. And of course, some lovely comments have been coming in. People have been echoing and chiming in, etc. So can I ask our two poll questions to be put up? The first question is one of basically asking people, what kind of issues and challenges do you face as a leader in the charity sector, working with those from another generation? None of your responses will be linked back to you as an individual. So please feel free to be really honest, because it would be really helpful to understand if you do face generation-related challenges, yeah? And honesty would really be very encouraged. We would really want to know how people genuinely feel. Awesome. Thank you. I'll probably give ourselves another 5 seconds and then close the poll. All right, maybe we can close the poll. Can I check, Stacey, if people are able to see the results as well? Yeah, all right. So you see, the reality is that there are issues in terms of people working with different generations, either because people see the values to be different, perspectives on issues being different, priorities being different, communication styles differing, mannerisms differing, etc. So it is a reality. So we are not making this up when we talk about generational divides and issues, etc. But then the bigger question is, and I bring us to the next poll before I want to comment on this one, but can I have the next poll question as well then, yeah? So this is essentially a direct question. I prefer to work with people from my generation rather than those from other generations. How do people feel about that? Okay, another 5 seconds perhaps. Okay, maybe we should lock the thing. So it's an 80-20 where despite all those differences, people are not necessarily fixated about working with only people from their generation. Now that is heartwarming. Challenging as it may be, I think it does tell us a little bit about the fact that, look, we are happy to take on that challenge because we see the value as well. Despite those differences, we can reach out. We are also understood in a sense. So I think that's very heartwarming. But bringing this back, I guess, to the question of leadership, it is a reality that, generational issues and leadership challenges require us to kind of be more inclusive, be more appreciative, recognize in our context our responsibility to bring others along. Yeah. And I think with that bit said, I guess I realize we probably have just 5 more minutes for this panel conversation. So perhaps one last set of questions for the panel, which would be, in terms of Singapore's evolving needs, etc., how do Gen X and Y need to collaborate better? So any one of you want to come off mute and just respond to that question, yeah?
I'll go first.
Please.
Everyone just listens to me. I'm kidding.
All right.
No. I think for my view on the journey, having worked and having had the good fortune of working across like multiple generations, so actually pioneer generation, Gen X, Gen Y, and actually even younger kids, is that the value, I would go back to, at the core, it's really about empathy and the value system, and how as a society, if we are able to have that openness of mind, openness of heart, to want to create a better future. You could be 5 years old and you could be 55 years old. It doesn't matter. So it's not, for me, this topic actually, when Stacey first approached me about, I didn't understand what it meant. I do understand. I mean, I did go to school, but I didn't understand what it meant because, again, the conversation of leadership and in social services, or leadership, or natural leaders and not leaders, but it's really, for me, it boils down to a value system. So it's very core and very foundational for me. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Irong. Anyone else has a view?
Yeah, maybe I'll chime in on that part. I guess it's really important for the openness on different generations working together. And, before we even start working, I don't think we should, come up with judgmental opinions or views. I think being able to accept the other individual, even if it's from a different generation, as still human beings, and communicate as one. And I think one of the greatest things that I learned from people in the Gen X, one of it was one of the person I managed to work with in a previous roles, Mr. Taizo's son. He runs Vivita International. It's really a creativity accelerator for kids. And his vision is really to enable young people enhance their creativity and focusing on free play. And to him, the greatest superpower is for them to have the ability to create their own future. So I think having that mindset to be less open for them to lead their own way, and then you can guide them along the side, you know, and like what my mentors always do, they don't give me the answer, even though I want the answer from them. You know, they actually always poke me and say, hey, you know, look at this, that, and then guide me along the way, and then make me to ask more questions. And from there, I actually understand it a lot better, not just from what he shared, but more within. So I understand myself a lot better through the whole process. So mentoring works well, and definitely you should definitely look out at the AFA, the mentoring AFA that Eric shared earlier on, and definitely find someone that you could resonate with, and definitely hope that you have a great relationship with all the various generations across the social service sector. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks,
I'll
Sharon.
jump in
And
for the. I was just going to say, I'm going to jump in for the last point. I think as leaders, especially in social services, one of the things that is very important is the willingness to take risk for the team. So I give an example, like a lot of my volunteering work it involves bringing youth as young as like maybe 12 years old overseas, and it's like they will be under my care. And I do find that I take risks in the sense that we will do little projects with other school children overseas, and I basically would encourage the team to bring along their expertise. And then when they are over the other side, there's kind of like a free play, there's boundaries, but the free play will be for them to come up with their own programs, to make friends, to network, and they build themselves. And as a leader at the site, then what we do, or as a mentor at the site, we basically look out for their strengths. And then, you know, in the between where they are working out and roughing edges out, then they kind of work out their weaknesses. Definitely when there is this need and this mandate for myself to say, okay, I'm willing to take risks with my group, then actually it gets very stressful. But I think it's deserving, because with that, right, then I think a lot of the environment that we came from, where there's a lot of KPI, a lot of boxes to tick, the moment we release some of this, but to really listen and look at the situation and put things together, in fact, more sparks happen. And I find that's how collaboration happens. And it's so, as leaders, I would just say, how much are we willing to take that calculated risk? Yeah.
Absolutely. Any other words, Grace? Is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, my final thought would just be about, I think the one thing we can do to collaborate across generations is really just to build bridges and do introductions when we can, or connect the dots, or connect people. I think, I mean, us here who are in this room in particular, I think that we do have a wider network, and we are conscious about the value of continuing to expand the network and finding out what's on the fringes of the network, so like what's not within our network. And I think we all also do know people who may be younger or older than us who don't have that network. So I think that like just knowing them and being able to introduce them to other people, or to connect the dots, I think that would be a helpful way in which we can like build bridges across generations.
Awesome, great. And on that note, I think we do need to wrap up, but Eric, you've been so kind enough to give your time to us. So I'm wondering if you have any final comments. I won't try and summarize so many wonderful points, but Eric, if you want to take on that charge.
I am mindful that I'm a government rep today, so I shall give the typical, government response, and that's acronyms, right? We all love acronyms in Singapore, don't we? And I think I will end with 3 C's that are all important. I think collaboration, communication, as well as co-creation. So in the spirit of collaboration, so let's make communication a constant so that we can all together embark on a journey of co-creation. So on that note, I thank everyone for your time, and I also like to thank the moderator, Manoj, for excellent facilitation.
Thank you all very much. That was a fantastic summary, and with that, I'll probably hand over to you, Kitson.
Thank you so much, Manoj, for helping us to moderate this wonderful session. Well, fellow leaders, in fact, I guess most of us we have just undergone a 90-minute executive education on leadership. Wow, so terrific. And in fact, as what Eric has mentioned about the collaboration, the communication and co-creation, myself, I've learned a lot as well on what really makes good leadership. And hearing the insights from everyone, from the values that each of our leader was being brought up in, to the importance of having good mentors. And in fact, at the Center for Nonprofit Leadership, CNPL, we do have the STAR mentoring program that we mentor our new social service leaders, charity leaders. At the same time, we also extend this to our charity board members to be mentored. For the good reason is leaders raising leaders. And in fact, this is a really good program, and I really encourage all of us who are already not on the program to please approach any one of us at CNPL, and we'll be glad to have you on board either as a mentee or as a mentor. So at least, we can help to build the next generation of leaders in Singapore. Hearing from the panelists as well, trust is important, having the team with me that goes the extra mile to build that wonderful Singapore that we aspire to be. And also learn the things some of you mentioned about listen to the heart of the team, which is very, very important as a leader. Sometimes as a leader, we think we know everything and we tend to make all the decisions ourselves. No, it doesn't work that way. Really to understand the entire team and we can grow together as a team. And I like that part where was it Felicia who mentioned empathy is to replace the pride. Wow, as a good leader, I believe that is really important. Even for me, I must really, really thank our guest of honor, Eric, for being with us this morning. Had the privilege and honor of working with him when he was MHA in the SG Secure for the Punggol Town response team as well. I also had the privilege of working with Jaren, who is also a very active volunteer in the Punggol division, supporting us in Punggol West. Erong as well, Vice Chair for MVPC. Felicia, our fellow leadership alumni, who always agrees to step up, to help support any of our leadership programs. And of course, Manoj, I always joke that he has the signature spectacles that brightens up all our day, right? And that's Manoj for us, a fellow leader from our Leadership Alumni Working Group that always steps up for all of us. From the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for all of you for joining us this morning. And to end off, I like to quote what Eric mentioned, that leadership in the new normal has to be collaborative. And in fact, this is what CNPL is doing and will be doing. And our last part of the series, which I hope you could keep the date with us, which is on the 22nd of October, we started off with women in leadership. We've gone into Gen X, Gen Y leadership, and we have not forgotten our pioneers that have helped to build the Singapore we have today. So the last session is really about active agers in and after leadership. There's no such thing as retirement in the social service sector. I'm not sure if Dr. Che agrees, but there is no such thing as retirement. In fact, you become more active after you retire. And that's why we need your wealth of experience to be with us. And in this session as well, although it's termed as Gen X, Gen Y, we have basically Gen Z, Pioneer Generation, Merdeka Generation, everyone in this chat, because this is the family of leaders. So once again, thank you so much for joining us. And I shall hand the time over to Stacey.
Thank you. And as what Kixon has mentioned, right, the next session is on the 22nd of October. It's also a Friday, 10:30, and we look forward to your active participation and join us again as well.